Great to be back. It always says leadership expert. I am very much, and I think Michael mentioned this earlier, 10,000 hours, all that good stuff. Yes, I've probably done that. Am I an expert? No. The expectation being that we are always learning. I think it's always slightly dubious when someone claims to be an expert because every day is a school day. There is always an opportunity to learn a little bit more. So, with all that, I've completely shot my credentials to pieces. However, just make sure the clicker works. There we go. Today I will be talking, final guest notes. I'm very mindful that you'll be keen to get away from here and across to the bar. I'll be looking at how you encourage collaboration and inspire your workforce. There's been a lot of talk today. I've been trying to get in as many as I can. There's some really interesting stuff coming out. But from my angle, it is very much looking at it from the leadership perspective. I have forged my career through the military, and that's where it all started. And that's where I got my first exposure to what leadership can look like. The reality being, you're in a very fortunate place when you train with the military, particularly as an officer. You spend your first year just learning how to lead a team. Okay? Nothing else. There is no expectation other than to learn how to lead your teams. How many industries do you know that actually do that? The reality then being that when you step into the corporate world after 9 years service, it's a bit of a shock, realizing how little emphasis is placed upon leadership. So hopefully today I can share some of these insights to try and encourage that collaboration and inspire your workforce. Start with this because I think it's very key to understand that this is where I come from, and if you are a good organisation, this is something that you will bear in mind whenever you are trying to employ new leaders or when you are trying to drive strategy or an operating rhythm. Leadership is that central enabler. Okay? It sets the tone for the organisation and it is integral to the cultural foundation. It's frustrating when you're in a leadership position and you're dealing with individuals who don't want to work, who don't agree with what you're trying to do. They struggle to see the vision of the organisation. They struggle to see your vision. They don't want to get on board with the culture. The reality is, though, it is your job to drive that, whether you want to or not. But leadership is not an easy journey, okay? And you're not just born. You hear these quotes, oh yes, well he was just born to be a leader. No one is born to be a leader. My own experience, at the age of 23, that's when I started in my military career. At the age of 24, I took my first team of 30 soldiers. My prior leadership experience was being the captain of the under-15 rugby team for one game that we lost. It happens. I wasn't a natural leader. But then, how did I get there? Did I start as a natural leader when I joined the army? No. Have I become one now? I've got better at it. Why? Because I've learned from trial and error and from experience. Within the business world, and I was chatting to Taz earlier on about this, Workforce.com is a prime example of that. Okay? They've done the trial, they've done the error. 97 years of trial and error has gone into forming what they are. If we look around the room right this minute, let's estimate 2,000 years worth of experience sitting in front of me right now. There is experience and there is knowledge out there, but how have you got there? Did you turn up on your job on day one and you were just good at it? Hands up if you were. It's a very brave person who's got a hand there. But the reality is you have to learn to get to that point. So how do we learn? This is a question that any good leader should be prepared to ask themselves every single day or every time that there is a significant change in their organisation. Why should someone follow me? What reason have they got to follow me? This is a question that I have asked myself again and again. The trial, the experience, the knowledge, it's all got me to a place, but every single time I'm asking, why is someone going to follow me? These points here can be applied just as much in the battlefield as they can be in your organisation. When you are a leader and you are taking on board a team and you are trying to work out why they are following you, you need to understand what's going on in your environment. The operational role is a challenging one. What does it look like? For me, in 2008, it was deploying to Afghanistan, taking 150 soldiers under my command, It's a 26-year-old. Expectation being that it was going to change. I was going into Kandahar province. We were a strike team operating in an area that was the size of Victoria. So that's quite a challenge. That's my operational role. What's it looking like? How diverse is the environment? It's a tribal environment over there. So regardless of how much success you have with one village, you can fly 10 minutes down the road and have a completely different experience. It's the same in industry. One client is not going to be the spokesperson for every single client you ever have. They are diverse. They have different challenges. There are different problems that you need to face. How many times have staff got frustrated about the limited resources? We haven't got enough technology. We haven't got enough iPads. We need more paper. We need more access to things. We need more licenses. It's the same for us. We had 7 months over there on limited resources. Food was running out. Water was running out. When you were cut off from your supply chain, you could go 3-4 days without any fresh rations. We did 2 weeks without fresh rations. That was the reality of it. We were limited on resources. You ran out of communications. Imagine not being able to talk to the plane that was flying above you, bringing in all of the heavy firepower that you needed because the batteries are flat. I had a friend who had to use his personal mobile phone to ring the pilot. And the way he did that was he rang back to base. Then the base put him onto the speaker, and then they connected it so that he could call in a fire strike using his mobile phone. How terrifying is that in a modern fighting force? But these are the challenges, the limited resources that are available to people. Your fluctuating team. If you're working in a large corporation, there's a good chance that you'll lose 3 staff members and you'll get 3 new who just turn up. HR have recruited them for you. Have you ever met them before? Potentially not. Have they got a skill set which is just what you need for your team? Great, in they come. But it's a fluctuating team. You've got very little say on what's happening. How well do you know them? How much of an impact is that going to have on your culture and your team? I started with 150, I ended up with 1,000. You've got 1,000 individuals reporting to you, directly, indirectly, all with different backgrounds, all with different experiences. I was working with the British, I was working with the Afghanis, I was working with the Americans, I was working with the Canadians, we had a few of the Aussies out there, I was working with the Polish. How diverse is that as a fluctuating team? It's exactly the same in your organisations when your teams are fluctuating and changing. The multiple leader factor, how frustrating is that? How many different leaders are there? Are you reporting to the CEO or the CFO or the CXO or the culture or the HR? Okay. Are you having to report to the stakeholder? Does the client have a vested interest? Is the sponsor interested? How many different leaders do you end up with? I had a direct report, but he was based in Bastion, which was a 4-hour helicopter flight for me. So I also had the commanding officer of the unit that I was bolted onto. Then I had the fire support commanding officer I had to report to. And then I had the Afghan representatives who would come down to understand what was happening in their country. And then I had the US defense secretaries who were asking what was going on. What was money being spent on? What were you doing about it? You then have the British press who turn up. You then have the press officer you have to liaise with. There are all of these multiple leaders with differing and conflicting views that you are trying to juggle. That is a challenge of being an effective leader. You need to understand what it looks like and how you can try and protect your teams from that as much as possible. Because if you expose them to the noise that you are receiving every single day, they're going to fall over and walk out the door. For those who were here last year, I've harped on about this before, the traits of leadership. These are our key pillars that I've identified for my own expectations, how I like to operate, things that I think will fluctuate for every single business. There are days when you will need all of these, and there are days when you will need 1 or 2. The heart of mine is very much the trust element, with communication supporting all of these things. Okay, this is something that I can go on for hours about, but please just bear it in mind as I continue with the talk. So, things to be aware of as we go through the talk today. What I'm looking at from a collaboration and inspiration point of view, 3 topics. Creating the culture, speaking from the head and the heart, and enabling effective communication. There's been lots of talk today around culture. I will touch on some of those things. This is my own take. There are some far more educated people than I am, some experts out there. Michael, I know you didn't want to be one, but maybe you are. But it's acknowledging that there is a big impact. All of these things will go into being an effective team leader that allows you to inspire and collaborate. So when you are creating the culture within your organisation, firstly, you need to be aware of what it looks like. If you're turning up as a new team leader, how do you know what the culture is like in your team? Do you talk to them? Has someone given you some feedback? Have you taken a survey? Great excuse that I get when I'm working with clients, headquarters or the head office is responsible for sending out the surveys. Why? What stops you from sending out an email to your team? Hey, a couple of things I just wanted to know. Why do you come to work? What interests you? Okay? It's not hard to gain this access, to get a feel for what's going on in your team. If you're new to a team, you need to have awareness to what it is that drives individuals. You need to be out and collaborating with them, understanding, chatting to them. The expectation and accountability for the culture sits on your shoulders. Yes, there will be a cultural overarching approach for the organisation, but you as a team leader have your own accountability. This is a word that so many people love to try and escape. And I've worked with small, large, diverse, national, global businesses. And this is a classic one where businesses fall over, where there is no accountability at the leadership level. I don't feel supported. I don't feel that if I try and do something, someone will back me. Well, do it yourself. What's wrong with you taking that accountability and actually getting stuck in and trying to own it? Because if you don't, how on earth are your team ever going to feel inspired to work with you? It links into that psychological trust element. If people don't know what culture they're in, then they're obviously not feeling very safe. They're not feeling as though you're communicating and engaging with them, giving them that opportunity to have buy-in. And if they don't have the trust, they're not going to share with you. So if your team members are turning around and they're not telling you what the culture is like, maybe you need to get to know them slightly better. Story that I'll always come back to, my first team of 30 soldiers, as a 24-year-old, freshly graduated, I still know all their names. That's 16 years ago, because I chatted to them and I got to know them. I lived in Germany with them for 2 years. Some came, some went, but I got to know them. I chatted to them. I met their families. I understood what they'd done on the Friday night. Sometimes I didn't want to know, but such is life. That links into that verbal and non-verbal communication. How approachable are you? Do you know what your style is like when it comes to communicating with your team members? Is your door always closed? I have an open door policy. However, I'm going to sit in the corner of the room and everyone will watch as you walk and enter my office. And everyone will wonder what you're talking about when I decide to close the door because it's a personal matter. How many people are going to walk across the office and want to sit and chat to you? We'll come on to that a bit later, but just have that going through the back of your head. How do you communicate with your team members? Joy of being part of an enormous powerhouse like PwC is we get access to some great information. Okay, John Katzenberg wrote The Critical Few, talked about the importance of culture. This is a different angle to some of the other people who have been talking about it, but all of the principles are very much the same. Katzenberg talks about this efficient organisational model. It says there are 3 pillars. There is the strategy, the operating model, and then the culture. Your business strategy is where your business needs to go. If you're a team leader, you should have your own strategy. How do you feed into that bigger picture? Then you have the operating model. How are you going to get there? What is the route that staff are going to take to get to that end point? And then you have the culture that brings it all together. That is what it is that's going to make people get up and go. I can guarantee you that standing there saying, by the way, guys, we need to storm this machine gun post. The way we're going to do it is you're going to go up the front, I'm going to go up the left, you're going to go up the right. Are we quite comfortable with that? Away we go. So I've got the strategy, I know where I need to go. I've got the operating model, I've told them what they're going to do. What do you think the likelihood is of them stepping over the cover of where they're sitting and running into open fire? If there is no culture, if there is no feeling of support, a bond, a trust, then how on earth am I going to get them to do that? And you may be sitting there going, why on earth would anyone ever do that? I've seen it happen. That trial and experience is bloody hard work. I've got friends who have done absolutely outstanding things leading teams. A friend of mine was shot while he was undertaking that kind of order. He punched himself in the chest to hemorrhage the bleeding and kept going. That's slightly heroic. The fact was his signaller was following him when he did that and kept going and supported him. When my friend finally fell over because he'd run out of blood in his body to keep him operating, his signaller picked him up and ran under fire back to a helicopter to get him out. Now that's a culture there. You are prepared to follow somebody who is getting shot at, and you're going to be there, and then you're going to pick them up and get them out of there. Now, for context, for those who aren't aware, the average fighting weight that we would operate in the desert was roughly 40 kilos. So I weigh about 90, so it's almost half my body weight I'm carrying. We're operating with females who were 4'11", who were carrying the same weight. So in that scenario, when my friend was shot, he was weighing 100 kilos, plus his kit. The signaller who was following him was carrying his kit plus the radio. So he had 60 kilos of kit. So you have an individual with 60 kilos of kit on his back, then picking up somebody who weighs 100 kilos and running under fire. You cannot pay someone enough money to do that. I can guarantee you, the average soldier who deployed to Afghanistan from the British Army was on the equivalent of £18,000, which, give or take, translates to about, $30,000 these days? Okay. We don't get tax rebates. Or we do, but it's pittance. So we don't get tax-free breaks. So it's not money that is paying people to get out there. There is a culture that underlies all of this. Katzenbach talks about these key components of how you create that culture, the traits, okay, the characteristics of how people behave. What are the traits that you will tolerate in your organisation? Is it safety? Is that a trait that you want to have? Is it innovation? These are the characteristics. These are the one-worders that you want people to work towards. Once you've got those, you can then have the behaviours. Okay, what do people do on a day-to-day to actually demonstrate those traits? So if you decide to have safety as one of those traits, the behaviour is that they're checking up on each other. They're not walking past something that they have seen that could be dangerous. Bits and pieces like that. It's small, but it's meaningful. It builds trust. If we've all agreed on the safety and we're going around and we can see people are actually taking an interest in one another, then you're going to start building a bit of bond, a bit of that psychological trust. You have the authentic, informal leaders who will help you on that journey. Okay, those are the people within your organisation who don't have to be in official capacity as a team leader, but they're pretty good when it comes to EQ. Okay, they are able to read a situation. They are somebody who will get out and they will know other people in the team and they'll be happy to drive and initiate some of these plans that you've got going. If you're trying to change your culture, you need to engage these individuals. The exemplars do it well and show how others have to do it. The exemplar out there is someone that you want to get on board and say, hey, this is what we're trying to achieve. This is how we can demonstrate better practice. This is how we can get the behaviours going. Other people look to them because they are those authentic, informal leaders. You've got the early adopters, the individuals who are quite happy to jump on board and try something new. You've got the networkers who know everybody. If you work in a big organisation, particularly professional services, it's normally the EAs. Okay? If you get to know the executive assistants, they know everybody because they have to. Getting people like that on board can be fantastic for your business if you're trying to change the culture. And then finally, you've got the pride builders, the people who go around and actually just smile and tell everyone how they're doing a great job. Which is extremely important when you're trying to change a behaviour. Hey, you're doing a great job there. It was really good to see how you interacted there today. It's not your job as the leader to constantly do that because it becomes repetitive. If you want it to work effectively and change the culture, you need to bring others on the journey. And then finally, you've got the measurement. Whatever you're looking to put in place, you need a way to measure it. If it's safety, how many incidents were we having? How many are we now having? How many conversations are we having about how we can improve this? Identify what that metric is so that you can track and see whether or not you are successfully changing that culture and that mindset. The good old multi-generational workforce. They impact on this culture because they're all different. We are now entering this era where there are 5 different generations in the workforce. Depending on what the title is you want to call them, I know it's always up for debate. The Gen X's, the Millennials, are they Gen Ys? The Gen Z's, Gen Alpha, I think I heard one of the other speakers mentioning. Challenge being that you are having to deal with these people and they all have a different perception and expectation. That is hard work. It is not easy. How do you take that on board? How do you communicate to them? How do you get them moving? Because they will have their own approach and their own mindset towards these things. Speaking from the head and the heart is one of the easiest ways you can demonstrate you're being genuine about what you want. That authenticity is very easy to read. You know if somebody is lying to you. You know if someone doesn't believe. You need trust and connection. You need to build on these things to be able to actually engage people. But it's a balancing act. It's not easy. It's very hard to try and get across the most important critical things from a practical perspective, balanced against the emotional. And you need empathy, which is one of the hardest things teams tend to grasp. Trying to understand what other people are going through and their challenges. And it's exactly the same approach when you're dealing with high-performing teams as dysfunctional teams. The high-performing teams are there. They have a culture. They know what they want to do, and they're bloody good at doing it. You need to step in, and you need to be honest. You need to make sure that whatever you're telling them is genuine, that you believe it, because they will see straight through it, and they will leave you in the dust, and they will keep going. Operating with paratroopers is one of the highest levels that you can achieve prior to the Special Forces step up. They are bloody switched on. They have fought hard to get their positions, and they will eat you alive if you're not prepared to do it. And there are plenty of businesses out there that take exactly the same approach. Dysfunctional teams need that reassurance that actually you are genuine in how you're trying to engage them. But at the same time, it's a much harder balancing act. Because if you say the wrong thing, rather than leaving you for dust, they will just fall over. They will just continue to be the problem children. They will fight and they will kick and they will take any opportunity they can to disrupt you. So you need to make sure you're winning them over and you're engaging them at the right level. And it's not easy, but leadership never is. Anyone who thinks that by stepping up into a leadership role it's going to be a bit of a cruise, you are completely disillusioned. Money should not drive you to take a leadership position. To quote Simon Sinek, leadership is a privilege, it is not a right. Challenge we find in industry is that people get promoted because of the fact they are technically good at what they do. However, you can guarantee that 9 times out of 10 they've never led a team before and they've got no idea how to, because industry is not training them to do so. So it is hard work, and you need to be prepared to step up and have a go. Communication is massive. If you want to get your message across, it needs to be effective. Linking into the awareness of transparency. How many times, and I've heard it a couple of times today in talks, a business is not transparent in what's going on. Oh, well, we don't want to tell them because we might scare them. Or we don't want to tell them because we don't know anything. Well, let them know that so that they at least can anticipate there will be an update at some stage. Flex that communication style to make it most effective. Reduce the noise. 400 emails a day. How effective is that? I had a role where I got 315 emails a day, Monday to Friday, and 200 a day on weekends. Realistically, 10% of that was relevant for me, but I had to deal with all of it because they had established a culture where you can just email everyone and it'll make it fine. And that was in the military. So that's rather depressing. How would you communicate to these different groups? In all honesty, you change your style of communication every single time you are interacting with a different cohort of people. It could be the Mighty Bugs Gladiator under-9 rugby team that I coach every single Friday night, and I'm here for you rather than them tonight, so that's quite a big thing. But how do you communicate with them? Compared to your colleagues, who technically should be far more mature than the under-9 rugby team, but 9 times out of 10 they aren't. Well, how do you communicate at 10 o'clock at night in the Hilton bar when Taz is trying to buy you another drink? Or you're taking a team of soldiers who have just turned up and are about to deploy with you on operations, and you have their lives in your hands, and they want to know what you're talking about. So we flex our styles every single time we are chatting to a different group. But what we say isn't always as much or isn't always as important as how we say it and how we engage with staff. Body language, eyes, ears, mouths, arms, standing, sitting, higher, lower. So many different points we can go into. Are you a controller? Do you like to dominate the conversation? Will you not back down from those people who like to bully, think they know what they're doing? Or do you just give up? How many times have you looked around an office at a meeting and seen people dozing off on their phones? How many times have you had to stand up on stage and watch people and think to yourself, are they listening to me? Have they had enough? But people's body language says a lot, and if you're not picking up on those things, you're missing out on so much information. It will give you a good idea if your message is hitting home, if what you are trying to say is working. The power of active listening. You should listen more than you talk. I wish my mother had learned this. It's a challenge, though. We've got so much information. You know what you're doing. You actually want to tell everybody everything. But you need to take the time to step back and listen to what they are saying. And really listen. Do not stand there and think to yourself, right, okay, what are we having for dinner? What am I going to watch tonight? It's a Friday night. What do I want to drink? They've stopped talking. Yes, I really agree with everything you've said. How off-putting is that? How frustrated do you get when you can see someone doing it to you? I've just got to send this message. Keep talking, I'm listening. Are they? If you're a team leader, if you are going to have a genuine conversation with staff, then take that time and listen and learn their language. Because you can pick up, again, on so many things. Effective feedback cycle. You may have seen this in various other guises, but it's making sure that that conversation is being had and you are coming back to revisit it. Picking up on problems, identifying what they look like, trying to work out how you're going to fix it. Options and solutions as to how you're going to fix these things. Keeping that communication going. Are you bringing in 1 or 2 people? Are you bringing in the team? You can have these sessions with your team when you're trying to understand what the culture is like. Or if you're just trying to performance manage someone, or an issue has arisen with a customer. This cycle works again and again, depending on who you're trying to engage. Do you want to be someone who is assertive? Are you driving? There are times when you will need to drive staff because they just need to hit a deadline, and there are times you can take them on the journey. You cannot drive culture. You must attract it. You must make people want to get on board. Do you need to be more persuasive? Are there bridging arguments and opportunities out there? This push-pull approach needs to be flexed. Thinking back to that earlier slide, flexibility is key. Again, another piece of information that I have access to with PwC. The Difference did a great article on cutting through the clutter of corporate communications. How you engage with your staff. 4 very simple points. Make it simple, honest, timely, and personal. Do you need to write a massive email? Can it be 2 lines? Can you catch up with the team at a morning stand-up? Can you go and see someone for a face-to-face? Short, sharp, pithy, make it worthwhile. Otherwise, they're just going to switch off and they will delete it like every single email that you delete. But theory versus reality, how easy is it to put all of these things into practice? Bloody hard. I was attached to the Polish Special Forces, and every single element that I've talked about today was being tested. You're working with a unit that doesn't even speak the same language, so there's your first barrier. And then all of a sudden you're trying to bring your team on the journey. You're taking your team and working with this whole new organisation that have got a whole different practice and how they operate. What are those cultural perceptions that other people have got? How diverse is the team you're trying to lead? How well are you communicating with your team? How much information have you got? How much information are you getting off of them? Is there another team leader you're now having to report to? It's bloody hard work. And when you're loading onto a helicopter and you are flying into the areas where you get shot at from the hills because the hills are higher than the helicopters, because we cannot fly any higher than that. We're in the base of the Hindu Kush. It is cold, it is scary, and it is terrifying when you're in a helicopter and you can see people in their houses at the same eye level as you. And the bad guys have plenty of weapons that they can just take pot shots at you as you're flying along. So when you're getting on the helicopter, you need to make sure that your team is happy with what is going on. How well have you communicated with them? Have you spoken from your head and your heart? What is the culture like in your team? Is there going to be a fear factor here? What happened last week? Was there a helicopter shot down in the same area? Do you get it right every time? No. It's as simple as that. You do not get it right every time. But if you have a good go at it, and you are genuine in what you are trying to communicate, you will get the message through. So to finalise or close out, quick reflection on the traits. Identify one or two which may be most prevalent to you. Times when you'll have had to use it. Times when you thought to yourself, actually bugger it, I've had enough for the day, I don't want to be the team leader anymore. Biggest challenge I had in the army was you spend a year learning how to be a team leader. The joy of going on exercises, you get to hand over your rank slide after 24 hours. So I'll have a go at being the boss, and then I'll give it to someone else, and they can kick back and have a bit of a snooze. And then what happens is you get posted to your first unit, and you finish your first 24 hours, and you go home, you hang your berry up, and you're just like, whew, that's it, done. Oh, shit, I've got another few years of this. And you have to turn up, and you have to deliver every single time. There's always a legacy mindset. I turned up in front of a board of a very large company, and I was there to try and advise them how to improve their leadership and their culture. I walk into the board, you're all dressed up as consultants are with your suit on. The general manager turns around to you, and they're in their late 60s, and they say, you look 12 years old, what can you tell me about how to lead a team? And your team's standing behind you, and they're just like, oh, this will be interesting to listen to. It's hard work. No matter how far you've come, no matter how many trial and errors you've undertaken, there's always going to be another barrier for you to hit. How you conduct yourself every single time will determine how you're going to grow. Are you reflecting on where it's gone well? Are you reflecting on what's gone wrong? My parting quote to you, listen. Listen to what is going on in your organisation. What is there that is already out there? What has gone well? What hasn't gone well? When was the last time an organisational change happened? How much information did you take off of it? What technology is available? I'm going to plug the workforce.com again. There is information out there. There is stuff. There is knowledge. Learn from it. Learn from all of those things that people are telling you. Learn from what you have seen. Learn from what you have done. And then decide to lead. Thank you.